You're 25. You just got the job, the one you worked years for. And sitting in the dealership parking lot, under the lights, is the car you've wanted since you were 16. This is the story of what happens if you buy it. And what happens 5 years later, when the bill for that decision finally comes due. Let's set the scene. You make around $65,000 a year, which after taxes puts roughly $4,300 a month in your account. You've been renting a small apartment, driving a car your parents helped you buy in college, and for the first time in your life, you have real, spendable income. The dealership salesman is friendly. He tells you that for just $680 a month, this car can be yours. $680 sounds manageable. It's less than 15% of your take-home pay. So you sign. Here's what that $680 a month actually represents. The car costs $48,000, which is close to the average price of a new vehicle in the United States today. You put down $3,000, finance the rest over 72 months, which is now the most common loan term in the country, at an interest rate of 9.5%, because at 25, with limited credit history, you don't qualify for the low rates advertised on television. Over those 6 years, you will pay almost $16,000 in interest alone, on top of the price of the car itself. But the payment is only the beginning. Full coverage insurance for a 25-year-old driving a brand new vehicle runs between $280 and $360 a month, depending on your state, because insurers still treat drivers under 26 as high risk. Add registration, which on a car this expensive can run several $100s a year. Add routine maintenance, oil changes, tires, brake pads, all of which cost more on a newer, more complex vehicle than they did on your old college car. When you add it all up, the true monthly cost of owning this car isn't $680. It's closer to $1,100 a month, once insurance, maintenance, and fuel are included. Now let's talk about the part almost nobody explains clearly: depreciation. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, it loses value immediately before you've even merged onto the highway. Industry data from sources like Carfax and Kelley Blue Book consistently show that a new car loses around 20% of its value in the first year alone. By year 3, it has typically lost 45 to 50%. By year 5, the point where you're finally free of most of the loan, it has lost around 60% of what you paid. Your $48,000 car is now worth roughly $19,000, while you've spent that entire time paying interest on the full amount. This is the trap. You are paying interest calculated on the original loan value, while the actual asset backing that loan shrinks every single month. Financially, it's one of the worst structures you can enter voluntarily. You're borrowing against something that is actively losing value faster than you're paying it off, which is exactly why so many people find themselves owing more on their car than it's worth, a situation lenders call being underwater on the loan. This isn't a rare edge case. Data from auto finance research firms has shown that in recent years, close to 1 in 4 trade-ins involved a borrower who was underwater, meaning they still owed more than the car was worth, sometimes by $5,000 or more. That negative balance doesn't disappear. It typically gets rolled into the loan on the next car, which means the next purchase starts even further behind than this one did. It's a hole that gets deeper the more times you trade in before the loan is paid off. There's also a part of this business almost nobody thinks about: the financing itself. Many dealerships make more profit from arranging your loan than from selling you the car. When the finance manager offers you an easy monthly payment, they're often marking up the interest rate above what the bank actually approved them for and keeping the difference. A rate that could have been 8% becomes 9.5%, and that markup, spread across 72 months, quietly adds another $1,500 to $2,000 to what you pay, without you ever seeing a separate line item for it. Let's fast forward. You're 30 now. 5 years have passed since that night in the dealership parking lot. The excitement of the new car wore off somewhere around month 4. According to psychologists who study what's called hedonic adaptation, the process by which humans quickly return to their baseline level of happiness after a positive change, no matter how exciting it felt at first. The car is still nice, but it's just a car now. Meanwhile, you've paid roughly $66,000 total over those 5 years, once you count the loan payments, the insurance, and the maintenance. You own a vehicle worth about $19,000. You have almost no savings, because that $1,100 a month was the difference between saving aggressively and living payment to payment. Now here's the version of your life that almost nobody shows you. The version where at 25, instead of buying the dream car, you bought a reliable 4-year-old sedan for $14,000, paid cash using savings and a small loan you cleared in a year, and kept your monthly transportation cost, including insurance, maintenance, and gas, around $350. That's a difference of about $750 a month compared to the dream car scenario. If you had taken that difference and invested it every single month into a simple low-cost index fund tracking the S&P 500, which has returned an average of about 10% annually over the long run, here's what happens by the time you turn 30. $750 a month, invested for 5 years at a 10% average annual return, grows to approximately $58,000. Not because you did anything extraordinary, not because you picked winning stocks or timed the market, simply because you let compound growth work in the background while you lived your life. At 30, instead of owning a depreciating asset worth $19,000 and having close to nothing in savings, you have an investment account worth $58,000, still drive a perfectly functional car, and have full flexibility to buy whatever car you actually want, in cash, without ever touching a loan. That gap between the dream car path and the modest car path is roughly $77,000 in net worth by age 30. Not because one version of you earned more money. You earned exactly the same income in both scenarios. The only difference was where those first $750 a month went, toward a depreciating loan or toward an appreciating asset. And that gap doesn't stay the same size. It grows. If that $58,000 investment account is simply left alone after 30, with no further contributions at all, growing at the same 10% average annual return, it becomes roughly $150,000 by the time you're 40 and around $390,000 by 50. That's the strange, almost unfair power of compound growth. The earliest dollars you invest do the most work, precisely because they have the most years ahead of them to double and double again. A dollar invested at 25 is worth dramatically more by retirement than the same dollar invested at 35, even if the 35-year-old eventually invests more money in total. So why do so many smart, capable people choose the dream car anyway? Because the decision was never really about math. It's about identity. A car is one of the most visible purchases you'll ever make. Everyone at your job, your friends, your family, sees it every single day. Behavioral economists call this status signaling, using visible purchases to communicate success to the people around you, even when the underlying financial reality doesn't match the image. Social media makes this worse. Watching other 25-year-olds post photos next to their new cars creates a subtle, constant pressure to keep up, even when you have no idea what their actual financial situation looks like behind the scenes, how much debt they're carrying, or how close to broke they might actually be. There's also a simpler psychological trap at play, the monthly payment illusion. Car dealerships learned decades ago that almost nobody asks, what is the total cost of this vehicle? They ask, what's the monthly payment? $680 a month feels completely different from $48,000, even though they're mathematically the same decision. Stretching a loan from 60 to 72, or even 84 months, doesn't make the car cheaper. It just hides the true cost behind a smaller, more digestible number, while you pay thousands more in extra interest for the privilege. None of this means you should never buy a car you're excited about. It means understanding what that excitement actually costs you, in a way the dealership will never explain, because it's not in their interest to. Financial planners who specialize in this exact decision generally recommend something called the 24-10 rule. Put down at least 20% of the purchase price. Finance for no more than 4 years. And keep your total transportation costs, payment, insurance, gas, and maintenance combined, under 10% of your gross monthly income. Run the dream car scenario from earlier through that filter, and it fails on every single point. The loan was 72 months, not 48. The down payment was 6%, not 20. And total transportation costs ran closer to 20% of gross income, not 10. Here's the version of this decision that actually builds wealth. Buy the reliable, unglamorous car in your 20s, while your income is still growing and your expenses are still low. Invest the difference automatically, so it happens before you're tempted to spend it. Let compound growth do the heavy lifting for a decade. Then, Once you're 35 and your investment accounts have grown large enough that a car purchase doesn't require a loan at all, buy whatever car you actually want, in cash, funded by an asset that grew instead of one that shrank. At that point, the same dream car doesn't put you at financial risk. It's simply a reward, paid for by money that was already working for you in the background for 10 years. The uncomfortable truth is that almost every dollar of visible wealth you see around you, the car in someone's driveway, the watch on their wrist, tells you almost nothing about their actual financial position. Some of the wealthiest people you'll ever meet drive completely unremarkable cars, precisely because they understood this math decades ago and decided that looking rich and actually becoming rich are two entirely different goals that often work against each other. Researchers who study millionaires in the United States have consistently found the same pattern for decades. The majority of people with a net worth over $1 million did not buy their most expensive car new, and many drive vehicles that are several years old. It's not that wealthy people can't afford a new dream car. It's that most of them built their wealth by treating a car as transportation, not as a statement, and directing the money that could have gone toward status instead toward assets that compound. By the time they can afford the dream car without a second thought, most of them have simply lost interest in proving anything with it. None of this is about guilt, and it's not about telling you to live like you're broke while you're actually doing fine financially. It's about sequencing. The same dream car, purchased at 35 with cash from an investment account that's been compounding for a decade, costs you nothing in opportunity because the money was never going to sit idle anyway. The exact same car, purchased at 25 on a 72-month loan, costs you closer to $130,000 in total. Once you count the payments, the interest, the insurance premium, and the growth you gave up by not investing that difference instead. Same car, same badge on the hood. $130,000 difference in outcome, depending entirely on when you bought it and how you paid for it. If this changed how you think about the next car you buy, that's exactly the point of this channel. Taking financial decisions that feel simple on the surface and showing you the real math underneath, so you can make the choice with your eyes open instead of your emotions running the numbers for you. Like and subscribe for the next one.